Welcome, everyone. We are still letting folks into the room, so we're just going to play a quick video while everybody's entering. Thank you.
Ngolo ntomono kutapa nata pa ntomono ninjenne to akukasa mituka bage yo ntomono migral tongono oso mungera migral tongono obo mukutano ni kore ntito nata bage ntito ntukuti masa nanka kinya ngakini ninye ni chomo som kore bobo bonu ba yene amono bana ngini na banyi neshori amage mirita ina duage kore bana ntomono ni no sira jin data yal ba yan no sina do ba yan leng ketere to yo anana ji ko mitadan ketere to yo leng ame we trisi yo
When the Community Land Act was enacted in 2016, Namati and its partners embarked on a journey to support communities to fulfill the requirements that are provided for under this law, so that then communities can register their lands. Registration is a critical aspect to support communities secure their tenure rights and limit issues around land grabs or dispossession of communities of their land. Previously, women were not members in many of the group ranches. The Community Land Act is definitely a game changer. It's extremely progressive. It provides for equal rights for women and men in membership, which means that for the first time, women have equal chances to be able to make decisions on how their lands should be managed.
Cortada pa antomonok, me ngor rabang ni joko sabesyon samani. Ilpayene ka pen.
Land is a key asset. It directly has a link to power and influence. And since women are members and equal owners of community lands, they are economically empowered. They're part of decision-making processes. And this definitely clearly links them to reduced vulnerability to gender-based violence. Women are better able to move out of violent relationships because of the economic and social empowerment that comes with ownership of community lands.
Triste de dada, moro kure ata el tongona galgalari dada guni. Agino kore na ata, kiti jungta si yonyo, atua, ata na dada guluba bage, na igiti atua, tarna angkopu duage di mate, matara matongkop, igiti atua na gamati. Naga yu na yu longar na ako lagi janani. Kijokora bagun darna kuna kurupi pa kuna galakin nintomonok na lasma beto shele olpa yeni. Na kona kampuni na kana yakata yo amono tu neja lakini kumena kati kidogo wana kangor yongin.
My hope is that as communities secure their tenure rights, men who work alongside women, we are progressively seeing that men are appreciating the contribution of women in positions of leadership.
Orna dala chogu yo kona shiriani pokona ti yungu Kenya mai onga saba kiyo niki atotukudu agale ngermate kaje kubo yombele oleng karantomono kore pa ke endelea yana ko ba kunja ketu kore kuldarin logo no bonu ikera yol to no ti ko oleng karantomono.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our event today on Feminist Legal Empowerment, Grassroots Justice Defenders Advancing Gender Justice. My name is Akila Kolasari, and I work with the Grassroots Justice Network team at Namati. And I hope you all enjoyed that video as we were coming in. I think it's a powerful testament to the impact of women's leadership and decision making around community land. And we thought it would help us kick off our discussion today. Now, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping matters. We have interpretation here in English, Spanish, French, and Burmese. So please look for the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to activate the interpretation. And a few reminders to help our interpreters. Please introduce yourself before speaking. Please speak slowly and clearly, and kindly mute your microphone if you're not speaking. If possible, use a headset and be in a quiet space while you're speaking so we can hear you clearly. And as we get started, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, your organization, your location, and welcome again. We're here today to launch an important toolkit called Braided Justice, which was built together by the experiences of 15 members of the Grassroots Justice Network and shares concrete strategies and recommendations for advancing land, environmental, and climate justice while challenging and reshaping the power structures that allow gender inequalities to persist in this work. We're very excited to launch the resource today, and we will share the link. The link will be to the publication in the chat, so you can download it and take a look at the case studies within after this call. The publication is now in English, but we'll soon be releasing French and Spanish versions. So before we dive into the rich conversation we have planned, we thought we would just do a quick exercise to get us thinking. So you'll find in the chat a link to a Mentimeter. I'll also share it here on my screen. So please click on the link or go to menti.com and use this code. And just answer, we have two questions for you. One, quick reaction. What does gender transformative mean to you? When you hear these words, what comes to mind? You can share up to sort of 3 words that come to mind, and we'll explore this further during the call today. You can also place your comments in the chat if you aren't able to access the Mentimeter. So just a quick sharing. What does gender transformative mean to you? I see now the responses are coming in. Fair, equal, equality, equal opportunity, acceptance, freedom, support, empowering, just, and attacking root causes. The empowerment of women. I see a lot of empowering. I see justice and equality several times, liberation. And so these are all important concepts that, when it comes to what is a gender transformative approach to legal empowerment. And so thank you for sharing. We'll explore this further. And I think, hearing that this is really about attacking the root causes of inequality and injustice that we're facing. And that's what we hope to share more about today. And just a second quick reaction, we have another question for you, which is the work that we're doing is about legal empowerment. Before we get into more of an overview of what legal empowerment is, we're curious to hear from you. What does legal empowerment mean to you when you hear these words? You can, again, put in your responses in the Mentimeter, in the link in the chat, or use the code here. I see agency, voice, choice, justice, safety, representation, awareness of their rights, fearless, and understanding, These are all powerful concepts that I think form the core of legal empowerment, helping people to know, use, and shape the law. Communities' voices and human rights, right? Knowledge. Thank you for sharing these reactions. And we will keep the Mentimeter open so you can share your reactions. And please feel free to also share in the chat. I see in the chat knowledge, agency, and power. Thank you. So now we have heard from you all what legal empowerment means to you. And now I want to turn to Namati's CEO and founder, Vivek Maru, to share a few opening words on this from Namati and the Grassroots Justice Network. Vivek, please go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Akila. Thank you, everybody, each and every one of you for being here today. Thank you to our awesome speakers, Fariha, Maria, Nobule, Elisa. Let's talk about law. Law is one of the few tools that we have to constrain power, to protect basic rights. And that is why about 25 years ago, I told my grandmother that I wanted to go to law school. We were in the kitchen, we were speaking in Gujarati, but she switched into English without skipping a beat. And she said, lawyer is liar, which was discouraging. But my grandmother has a point. The law is complicated and intimidating and expensive. Sometimes it's repressive by design. So much so that for many people around the world, the law feels like a kind of lie. And I started Namati alongside some dynamic organizers and advocates 13 years ago with a vision of legal empowerment. And what we mean by legal empowerment is taking law out of books and courtrooms and putting it in the hands of ordinary people. And from the beginning, we have built a kind of global community. It's called the Grassroots Justice Network. Many of you are members. Today, there are members in 175 countries. And when we ask our members, what are the challenges that you are working on? What are the injustices that you are taking on? The top two responses that we get consistently, one is land, environment, climate, and the other one is gender injustice, gender inequality, gender discrimination. And so this is an extremely timely publication that we are launching, and this is an extremely timely conversation, and I'm thrilled to be here. I want to give you an example of how these issues play out and how they kind of interact with one another. In about 2014, in Sierra Leone, which is a small country in West Africa, a European oil palm company secured a lease agreement for 75,000 acres of rainforest. The lease agreement offered as rent $2 an acre per year for 50 years. It was thumbprinted by an illiterate interim chief who had been appointed by the government 4 hours away from the land in question. And no one asked the consent of the 20,000 people who live and depend on that land. There's a woman from Makbele. I'm going to show you a picture of her named Mrs. Binta Jallo. This is a picture, if you guys can see my screen, of Makbele. This is a front page of that lease agreement. This is the woman I was talking about, Mrs. Jallo. Mrs. Jallo, she was born and raised in this place back when Sierra Leone had a civil war in the 1990s. Mrs. Jallo fled with her family to Guinea, to the country to the north of Sierra Leone. And I just want to stop sharing. Let's see. Can you guys still see my screen, or were you able to see it?
Yes, Vivek, we can see it.
Okay. Here we go. She fled to Guinea with her family back in the 1990s. And when she heard about this lease agreement, she said, I don't want to become a refugee again. I don't want to lose my home. She was horrified. And Mrs. Jallo, she's a grandmother in her 60s. She's from a traditional Muslim family, and she was never sent to school. She doesn't know how to read herself. But Mrs. Jallo knows how to fight, and she got organized. She organized a residents association to try to make sense of what happened and see if there was a way to push back. When she did that, Mrs. Jallo experienced pushback because there's a tradition in Sierra Leone that questions of land are for men to deal with. There's an expression in Sierra Leonean Creole to say land business, na man business, meaning that these are land affairs are for men to handle. And so people said, Mr. Jallo, who are you to stand up and ask questions about this decision that government seems to be okay with? And Mrs. Jallo, she's tough, she's fearless, and she's a joker too. And what she would say back to people is mina man we poil, mina man we poil. So like I'm a man who spoiled and turned into a woman. That's the way she would retort to people who would criticize her. And eventually, because of her bravery and her fearlessness and her vision, people really came to respect her. And she and the Residents Association, they reached out to a couple of community paralegals. Community paralegals are organizers who can be a kind of bridge between law and real life. And the paralegals in the communities, they got hold of that lease agreement. They analyzed it alongside the Residents Association, and they identified a number of violations of Sierra Leonean land law. Armed with that information, Mrs. Jallo, the Residents Association, they confronted the traditional authorities, they confronted the company, and it didn't happen overnight. At one point, the company offered Mrs. Jallo a bribe, which she refused. But over 2 years of resistance, organized, legally informed resistance, finally, the company ultimately conceded and backed down and conceded that the lease agreement that they had was invalid. Land grabs like this, they happen all over the world very frequently, but reversals of land grabs like this are extremely rare. And when this happened, Mrs. Jallo was like, I learned that nobody can bend my hand. No one can take my land. I learned my rights. That is what is possible when you put the power of law in people's hands. Mrs. Jallo, she then became part of a movement that emerged across Sierra Leone out of many, many similar struggles like this of ordinary people trying to defend their lands, trying to defend against land grabs. And people came together across their own struggles to envision, to see patterns about how the system was failing and envision what a better system would look like. And that led to conceiving of a new law called the Customary Land Rights Act, which is really a dream. Every provision in that law grows out of lessons that people learned in their own backyards. And among those provisions are the idea that every community across the country should have free prior informed consent over any industrial activity that happens on their territory. And also the Customary Land Rights Act, as it's called, it empowers local land use committees and requires that those be made up of by at least 1/3 women, so as to reverse that tradition of excluding women from decision making. I just want to share my screen again. We like to think of this as a cycle. We call it the legal empowerment cycle. Can you guys see my screen, Akila?
Yes, but we're seeing your desktop right now.
Okay. How about now?
No, nothing yet.
All right. I'm not sure how I switch it over.
I think you might have to exit and try again.
See. How about now?
Yes, now we see it. Thank you.
These were the paralegals she reached out to. This was folks in Parliament on the day that the law was voted on in Parliament. And this is the cycle that I was referring to, which is that people can take on problems in their own neighborhoods by understanding and using rules that are already on their books. And we can come together across many such problems to analyze patterns, to envision what a better system would look like, and to fight together for better rules and systems, like the Customary Land Rights Act. When you do get a new law or policy, though, the reason this is a wheel and not a one-way arrow is that laws don't implement themselves. Laws on the books don't implement themselves. And so those become new levers and hooks which communities can breathe life into by invoking to solve problems in their own neighborhoods. Know law, use law, shape law. That is the heart of legal empowerment. It is a pathway, I believe, to gender justice. And in this moment when democracy is under threat around the world, this is a pathway, I believe, to deepening and defending democracy. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to you, Akila. I'm looking forward to the rest of this.
Thank you so much, Vivek. Thank you for sharing that powerful story of what's possible when we use legal empowerment to create change. And so now we are going to hear from Ye Yeyin's lead Namati's program in Myanmar. And Yeyin's will share a bit more about the toolkit, how it came together with our network members, and more about our gender transformative spectrum. So Yeyin, please, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Akila. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I will just speak, and I will turn my video off because I am now that I can save bandwidth and make sure I can hear you well. Okay အားလုံးဟိုဆရာဆရာမတို့ဒီနားလေးဆရာဆရာမကြီးတင်ပါတယ်ဟိုကျွန်တော်ကိုရဲရင်ပါခင်ဗျာ
My name is Ye Yin. I'm from Burma. We're working on land and environmental justice. We are working with groups of paralegals in Myanmar on those issues. Currently, I'm in Shan State. So today, could I ask Akila to help me do the screen sharing, please?
Yes. We will share the
ဆိုတော့လေကျွန်တော်တို့ဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ဒီနေ့ဟိုပါပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီမိတ်ဆက်ပေးမယ်
So today we'd like to introduce you to this resource. This resource is about gender transformative approaches to legal empowerment, especially for land issues, environmental and climate justice issues. This focuses on the role of gender, and it also draws our attention to gender issues in land. A lot of our partner organizations, like 15 of them, came together to discuss these issues, and based on the results of those discussions, this resource was composed. And today we'd like to introduce this resource to you. So during the last year, our partner organizations came together and discussed these issues. And we discussed gender roles and gender inequalities in land and environmental justice. We discussed about what problems of inequalities we are facing on ground and strategies to address those inequalities. And some of the key results from those discussions are presented in this resource. And there will be 5 strands of definitions. The first strand is about gender discrimination. When we look at gender inequalities on the ground, some of the problems are due to gender discrimination. The discussions we had were eye-opening, and some of the examples we noticed were about how community meetings are mostly attended by men. Some of that is due to outright discrimination. Only men were invited to the meeting. But in some places, it is not an explicit intended discrimination. People just didn't notice. And they just didn't know that women also needed to participate. So we would characterize such a shortcoming as being gender blind. So that's the second strand. And the third strand of issue is the need for gender sensitivity. That's where people have increased awareness that gender may be impacting the land issues. People know that women need to participate in land issues, and they make some sort of effort to include women. On the ground, we have found organizations that use 30% as a minimum participation for women in their meetings. And another strand of work would be people becoming gender responsive. That's where organizations assess women participation in their work and make conscious efforts to increase women participation. And however, when we do these gender responsive activities, we still need to consider how we can be truly gender transformative. It's making women participation really meaningful and ensuring that women have a chance and opportunities to participate in meaningful leadership positions. And also providing support, meaningful support, effective support for women to be truly participatory, truly included, and making sure that women contribute to the leadership and changes in land issues. And that's where the gender transformative strand of work happens. So I would call them as 5 different stages of gender issues in land issues on the ground. When we work on gender in land and environmental issues, we notice that such kind of resources will be very important. For Burma, we would start out with thinking about whether there are discriminations on the ground. For example, a woman paralegal in Burma, she faced quite a bit of resistance and judgment from their community because of traditional norms. She also noticed that the community is still practicing discriminatory inheritance traditions where women are not allowed to inherit land. And when women marry outside of their ethnic group, they get marginalized socially, economically, and in other aspects of life. So that women paralegal faced all those discriminations. And that lady has experienced a very inspiring journey from being discriminated against to becoming a celebrated paralegal who can help a lot in her community. And such journey was possible only because of all those support that we provided in helping the community to understand the land laws and land traditions. And a lot of contribution was needed to ensure that the community governance systems take into account of gender equality. Myanmar is also facing another specific set of challenge. We are under a military coup, and people have lost trust over the government systems. So it's only the community who can help each other out on the ground, and they have lost trust on all the government mechanisms. We also noticed a need for the community to understand the law and appreciate the protection it could provide, no matter how small it is, and also to develop their own laws and governance structures and mechanisms on the ground at the community level. And such efforts can be only meaningfully be done with the participation of women as well. And we have seen a lot of effective women leaders who are contributing to such development of local systems. And it's an example of a gender transformative approach. So this is just a brief explanation of how gender transformative approaches have been applied in Myanmar's situation. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk on this event. And I'd like to hand back over to Akila. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ye, and thank you for sharing the powerful learning that led to this toolkit, and for sharing more about the spectrum of gender transformation from gender discrimination all the way to gender transformative approaches. So we have just quickly before we get into our plenary discussion, we have a poll we wanted to share with you now that you have had a chance to hear what the spectrum is. We're curious to have a moment of quick self-reflection, and to think about, where would you rank yourself on the spectrum or your organization's work? So we have a quick poll that we will launch now. So I know this may feel like we're putting you on the spot, but we're just curious if you had a chance to look within your work or your organization's work. And I think what we found through this process was that really many of us, if we reflect honestly, we're on a journey. This is a journey, a process of learning and growing, thinking about how to make our work more gender transformative. And so we're just curious where you would place yourself on this spectrum. So please complete the poll, and just select one of the choices. And we should have time for perhaps one person to share, what thoughts this prompted for you and why you selected the category that you did. So we'll give just one more second for people to complete the poll. Where on the spectrum would you lie? Okay, we are going to close the poll in just 1 second. Okay, so now you should be able to see the results let me know if you're able to see this, but this is quite interesting. 36% of us feel that we are gender transformative, which is great. We are on our way there. But 20% say they're gender responsive, 24% gender sensitive, 4% gender blind, and actually 16% gender discriminatory. This is quite interesting, but I think we hope that this toolkit and learning and hearing from those on the call today will help us better understand some of the strategies for more gender transformative approaches in our work. If anyone is interested to share their reflections, honestly, why they selected, maybe somebody who selected gender sensitive or responsive, we do have a quick minute. Otherwise, after that, we'll move to the plenary discussion. If anyone would like to share, you can place your response in the chat, or you can raise your hand. So I'll just give a quick minute in case anybody wants to weigh in. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any raised hands, but please feel free to share in the chat what you thought of this exercise and why you selected the category that you did, why you chose to place yourself in that part of the spectrum. We'd love to hear, the self-reflections that are prompted by this exercise. So thank you. And now I will turn to our moderator for the plenary discussion, Elisa Scales. So Elisa, she is the director of the the Land and Resource Rights Initiative at WRI, where she works to strengthen land, environmental, and natural resource rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. And prior to WRI, Elisa was the executive director and co-founder of Resource Equity, a women's lands and resource rights nonprofit organization. And she has 15 years of experience in this space as a lawyer and an international expert on land tenure and gender equity and social inclusion. So welcome, Elisa, and please take the floor and kick us off.
Thanks, Akila, and thanks to Vivek and Yayint who spoke earlier. I hope you can all hear me okay. Let me know if you can't. Thank you. Yeah, great. I just thought I'd start. I'm happy to be here and share this event with you and to hear from our panelists. I'm sure it will be a lively and really informative and practical discussion, which I think is what we need to hear sometimes and really when we're thinking about strategies for change. About 20, 25 years ago, when looking at the question of land justice in particular, this question around gender inequity it was seen as a social issue. It wasn't technical, it wasn't structural, it wasn't institutional, but it was social. And because it was social, it was kind of framed as something that was insurmountable, something that couldn't change and that was locked in. But we know that societies can and do change. And that happens when we take a kind of interconnected, a braided, I love that word, approach. And so I'm really thrilled to be moderating today's panel on braided justice, and in particular in the concept of the braid, evoking as it does that interconnectedness, which is really the reality of change and what it takes to achieve true and lasting land, environmental, and climate justice that's also gender transformative. Very happy to be here and to be hear from our panelists today. And I'm going to start by giving doing some introductions of our panelists. We have with us today Faria Yasmin, who's a dedicated activist in the women's rights movement, and her expertise spans marginalized community mobilization, program implementation, and monitoring, and policy advocacy with stakeholders and CSOs. She regularly facilitates capacity building activities with women's rights groups, contributing to their empowerment and advocacy efforts. And she's actively engaged in key lessons and strategies from this learning exchange. She's been actively working for many years to advocate for the rights of migrant workers, GBV survivors, and women fisherfolk, pushing for their participation in decision-making processes and equitable access to resources and recognition. We also have with us Maria Sembrero Huaranga, who has a Bachelor of Science from the Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos, with a specialization in analysis and design of public policies, as well as in issues of gender, violence, and decoloniality. Currently, she's a specialist in monitoring, evaluation, and knowledge management at the Institutional Management Unit of the NGO Derecho, Ambiente y Recursos Naturales in Peru. She's experienced in public management, monitoring and analysis of environmental regulations, and in the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of projects related to investment and sustainable development, with a strong focus on gender and interculturality. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Nabula Chikuni. Nabula Chikuni is a passionate advocate for the inclusion and representation of women in the natural resource sector. With over 8 years of experience working in the Zimbabwe NGO space, she's championed the empowerment of women in various sectors of natural resources, including mining, farming, and climate change. Throughout her career, Nabula has raised awareness about the unique challenges women face, such as financial constraints and cultural barriers, and her efforts have provided training, technical support, and market access, helping women thrive and contribute to sustainable development and their inclusion in the natural resource space. So welcome to all our panelists today, and I'm honored to be sharing the floor with you all and really looking forward to hearing from you today. I'm going to start by asking a question and give those of you on the panel an opportunity to answer the questions. I have a couple of questions to ask you. So first, the first question is, as you engage, my fellow panelists, as you engage with communities on land, environmental and climate justice issues using a legal empowerment approach, why do you think gender transformative approaches are also so important? And I might start with you, Maria, if you would like to answer that question first. Thank you.
Muchas gracias con todos. Buenos días
Thank
a
you
todos
very
y todas.
much. Good morning to
Bueno,
everybody
el enfoque
here.
transformador es muy
Well,
importante a nivel
a transformative
mundial
approach is
en temas
very
de
important
género y a nivel
in
de la
general when it
organización que
comes to
represento,
gender,
porque
and especially
exige no
within the
solamente el
organization that I
reconocimiento de
represent,
las brechas existentes
because
de género, sino también
we
exige acciones
don't
concretas
necessarily just
de
need
cambio, de
recognition when it
impacto,
comes to gender gaps, but we
acciones
also require changes,
sostenibles con el
actions,
tiempo,
sustainable
acciones
actions over
sistemáticas.
time,
Para
and
ello, yo
systemic
también
actions as well.
quisiera detallar un poco que es
That is why
importante
I would
dentro de
like to
este
go
enfoque
into a little bit
transformador
more detail about what's important
incluir
about this
lo que es la
gender
interseccionalidad,
transformative approach.
¿no?
And what's important is to
Nosotros
include
cuando
intersectionality.
trabajamos con mujeres, tenemos
When we work with women,
saber que no solamente vamos a
we need
tener
to know
experiencia de
that
mujeres, sino de madres,
we
de
are not
trabajadoras,
only
de ganaderas,
going to be having
de
women's experiences,
ancianas,
rather we're also
de
going to be having
jóvenes,
experiences of
de
women,
rurales,
of
de
mothers
urbanas,
rather,
y tenemos que
older
saber
women,
que
rural
todas esas
women,
experiencias
working women,
están en una
fisher
sola
folk
persona
women.
y que se
We
ponen al
need to
mismo tiempo.
understand that one
Es
person may have
importante el
all of
tema
these
de la
different experiences
interseccionalidad
at the
en
same
el
time. That is why
transformador de género,
intersectionality is so
porque si no
important when it comes to
consideramos
a
todas
gender
estas
transformative approach.
dimensiones, no vamos
Because
a
if we
poder
don't consider all
tener
of these
cambio,
different
el
aspects and
cambio
dimensions,
positivo que
we will
nosotros
never be able to
nosotros
achieve change, a
trabajamos.
positive change
Y ese es
that
un
we are working
ejemplo
towards.
que he visto,
And this is an
incluso
example
en
that I
intervención
have
en campo.
seen
Me gustaría dar un
when
ejemplo
working in the
que cuando
field.
nosotros
I'd
entramos
like to
a
give an
campo a
example of this.
empoderar
When we go
a
to the
mujeres
fields, to the rural areas
indígenas,
to empower Indigenous
tenemos
women,
que tener en cuenta que no solamente son
we
mujeres,
need
sino
to bear in
también que
mind
esas
the
son
fact
madres.
that these are not just
Tenemos
women,
que
they
ver
may
en
be
cuenta
women,
todas las
mothers
dimensiones
as
que
well,
hay.
and we need to bear in
Y si
mind all
nosotros
the different
entramos a
aspects
empoderar
of their
sin
lives.
considerar quizás el nivel de
And if we
violencia,
try to
más que quizás
empower
ayudarlas a
without
empoderar,
bearing in mind
podríamos
the level of
inculcar un
violence that they
impacto
may be
negativo.
exposed to,
Tenemos el tema de
then we may
violencia hacia
cause
las
a
mujeres
negative
cuando nosotros como
impact.
organización nos retiramos no sabemos qué pasa dentro
For
de
example,
nuestra
when we
mente.
withdraw as an
Entonces,
organization without
y ahí ya
considering the
limitamos
violence
para
aspect,
siguientes
then we may
participaciones
expose these women to further violence.
la
That's why we need
participación
to
de las mujeres.
really include this in
Entonces,
our
yo
work and when
quería
it comes to participating and engaging with women.
no solamente mencionar la importancia del enfoque
So I
transformador,
would
sino
like
también
to not
cómo
only
el enfoque
highlight the
transformador
importance of a gender
tiene que
transformative
considerar lo que es
approach,
la
but also
interseccionalidad y cómo ver
why
que
gender
la
transformative approaches
interseccionalidad también
need
nos
to
permite
consider
ver
intersectionality
a
and why
personas
an
como actores
intersectional
claves
approach
y a
allows us to
problemáticas que
view
bajo una
people
visión
as key
simple no se pueden
actors
ver.
and
Marco a
in a
ello,
way
me
in which
gustaría como
we wouldn't
entregar
see them
3 o
with
4
just a
puntos
single
importantes
vision.
que la
And in that
organización
respect, I would like to share 3 or 4 points
realiza
that
para
are
poder
important
llegar al enfoque
to being able
transformador con
to
enfoque interseccional.
achieve a
Me gustaría
gender
compartirle que
transformative
es
and
necesario
intersectional
que antes de
approach.
entrar al campo
First, I'd
hacer
like
un
to say that
diagnóstico que
before
les va
going
dando
into the
central.
fields, doing
Nosotros
field work,
previo a la
you
entrada del
need to
campo
do a
hacemos
diagnosis.
un diagnóstico
We,
no
before
solamente
doing
técnico,
field
sino
work,
también que
do not only a
tratamos de
technical
tener un
diagnosis, but
relacionamiento
we
más
also
cercano con las
try to
mujeres, quizás ayudarles en algún momento en la
engage more
cocina,
closely with women.
hacer un
Perhaps we
deporte, porque
go
les
into
permite
the
abrirse,
kitchens with
les
them, we
permite
cook with
confiar en
them, we do
nosotros
sport with them,
y
because
poder
that
decirnos las
generates trust
problemáticas que sufren.
and it
También
enables them to
programas
open
con
up and tell us
hombres y
the problems
mujeres
they're
para ver
suffering
dónde
from.
o qué hora
We also
podemos
do
hacer
mixed
los
programs with
horarios
men
o
and
los
women
talleres,
to see
considerar
what the
guarderías
best
para que las
times to do
mujeres
workshops would
puedan
be. We think
dejar
about
o vivir a
nurseries
sus
or
hijos en un
childcare
lugar seguro y ellas puedan
services so
tener una
that women can
participación
leave their
más
children in a safe
significativa.
place to
Tener
ensure
alianzas
that
entre
they
otras
can feel
organizaciones para
better
ver
about
las diferentes
participating and
problemáticas que quizás
participate more
nuestra
effectively.
organización
We
no
also
está
partner with
capacitadas
other
para poder
organizations
apoyar. Por
to
último,
make sure that we can engage on
seguimos
areas that
el
perhaps
tema
our
de
organization
alianzas
isn't best
horizontales
placed
para
to
las mujeres
collaborate on.
beneficiadas.
And we
Gracias.
also work to see as how we can benefit women as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for that response. And I really liked the fact that you brought up the importance of intersectionality and also that empowerment can be a threat. And so if we don't take a holistic and transformative approach to these issues, we may be inadvertently contributing to the threat that's posed by empowerment. And so I really like that you brought up those issues. It's a very important aspect of what we do. And it underscores the importance of the holistic approach because societies exist as a whole, right? We divide them into parts, but they exist as a whole, and people exist in those societies in their various identities and contribute in multiple ways. And I really appreciate that you highlighted that in your answer. Thank you. Faria, do you have something to add to this question of the importance of transformative approaches? Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Yes, on the perspective of our country, Bangladesh, I would like to include something as the scenario of our country is really particularly different because the control of women, like control of men in women's life is really much visible in our country. And mostly here is dominance at women. There is control over her property, control over her land, control over her identity, recognition, and also the fundamental control, political control is very much visible here. So that's the reason we really need to focus on the gender transformative approach to ensure the equal balance and less discrimination towards the women in the community. Mostly the power dynamics, there is a really imbalance because we see that men are earning and have the control over the ownership or control over her identity as well. That's the reason we need this kind of approach. On the other hand, if we talk about in the terms of politics, there is also, it is seen that mostly like the main gender are really focused on this and they're pushing forwards to have more control over women's life. And talking about the current situation, it's very much, very much visible that we are getting backwards in terms of gaining the gender transformative approach because of the power dynamics. So if we focus on how to ensure that women needs to have this gender balance and have their identity and control over her land, environmental justice and climate, so we will able to give them the recognition they want.
Thank you, Fadia, for adding that important element of power, right, and control. And if we're not taking fully transformative approaches, we'll never get to those root cause issues that are the drivers of the inequity that we see. So thank you for raising that very important point. I'll move now to my second question. If you could choose, panelists, a specific game-changing, gender transformative strategy that you suggest others explore, what would it be? And could you share a case study or an example of how this has shown up in your work and what a difference it made? And I'll start with you, Nabule, to help us answer this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. So one strategy in our work that I feel has brought about a lot of change and possibly has long-lasting impacts is legal empowerment. We can't do everything without legal empowerment. Without legal empowerment, our interventions are not sustainable, and honestly, whatever change we achieve is short-lived. And with legal empowerment, we ensure sustainability. So I'm going to share one example from the work we did when I was still with the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, when we were working with women from Hot Springs, a community in Manicaland, who, as a result of diamond mining activities, they now had water pollution, they experienced loss of livestock. The main river that they were using for water, for the household, for gardening, was polluted by mining activities. And aquatic life was ruined. Where they were having gardens, they couldn't use that water. So it was not only loss of day-to-day living, but in terms of livelihoods as well. They were destroyed just because of a diamond mining company. So when Zela came in, we trained the women on their rights, their environmental rights, their rights as women, what they deserve, what they are supposed to get. We also equipped the women with skills. It's one thing to know your information, but when you're standing in front of the policymakers, the mining companies, and you can't clearly articulate your issues, that's a different ball game as well. So we gave them skills on advocacy and lobbying, what avenues to use, what do they need, how do they do it. And as a result, they then formed a community-based organization, a women-led community-based organizations that is going to participate in representing the issues of women, that is going to lead women and girls to go and meet with the local duty bearers. So after all those interventions, the women are now able to meet with their chiefs, to meet with their councillors when they have a problem, and clearly articulate issues, clearly give examples, and they're knocking on the right doors for them to get the change that they need. And as a result, change has been noticed in that community where water was a challenge. They are slowly either having access to irrigation, to boreholes being drilled. Where there was no land, they've been able to talk to their local leadership, and they've been given a portion of land where they can set up their community gardens. And those gardens, it's not about survival, it's also about generating income. They now can sell produce from those projects. And they now participate in environmental impact assessment consultations. When there's one, the women are there and they are speaking for the women. And we now call them the environmental monitors. So not only do they participate in the EIA, but they then follow up on what is the company doing, what is it doing wrong. And when it does something wrong, they go and demand, you promised A, B, C, D. Why are you not doing A, B, C, D? But they've also moved beyond local engagement. In some spaces, you find them at national level, sharing their voices, sharing their concerns, and doing what they need to do to get the attention of the decision makers, mining companies, policy makers. So because of all those activities, you find that, for example, the Environmental Act in Zimbabwe is currently being reviewed. It's in Parliament. It's because of those little steps that the women are doing. And if you read some newspaper articles, you'll find that some mining operations would have started without the women being consulted, and those operations will be stopped until there's a proper EIA that the women are part of. So with legal empowerment, when the act is then passed, it gives them a strong backing and it promotes sustainability into whatever efforts the women have put in. So we can try everything, but we need legal empowerment as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Nabule. It was really interesting to hear from you on how legal empowerment isn't just a framework, but it's a driver of change and a driver of gender transformation, which then also drives other broader social change. What a great example. Thank you for sharing that with us. Faria, did you have something to add to this question as well?
Yes. So one of the game-changing strategies that can be in terms of the case I'm going to share is that collective action, advocacy, and campaign. So while working for the women fisher folk, we have found that in the policy and in the implementation, so the women fisher folk tends to get ID card registration from the government. It actually gives them the identification and recognition as a fisher folk. Both applies for the men and women, but in the grassroots level or in the community, we have seen that due to social, political, and family bindings and stereotypes, the women are tend to get zero fisher folk ID card, because the society thinks that women should not go to the river to catch fish because it's not appropriate in terms of societal phenomena. And politically talking, the government officials also follows what the society thinks, so that the society does not give any pressure to the political level or the government level. And from the family or personal level, the like husband or the father or like brother, any male person, they also think that if the society is not accepting the woman as a fisher folk, so why should we allow them to go to the river and ask for get the fisher folk ID card. So when we are doing consultation meetings and workshops with the women fisher folk as well as with the men fisher folk, we have found that most of the men thinks that women should not get this and they will not allow. I'm using the term allow because that's how the mindset works. So it's more of a controlling power. So with the constant workshops individually with the men and with the women as well as the government officials, we have reached to a point that women should get the fisher folk ID card. And after a very, very long time with constant rallies, constant protest, and constant campaigns for one action, that is recognition for the women fisher folk and providing them the fisher folk ID card. So finally, like almost 2 years or more than 2 years, the government officials through this campaign and collective action, we have got to get along with the government officials who provides the fisher folk ID card, I mean from the ministry. And we have sit down with them, we have did a like dialogue sessions, and we have brought the women leaders who are the women fisher folk as well from the community to the ministry, where they directly have this connection with the government officials as an advocacy and what are the demands they want. So we have highlighted that in the policy of or the identification of fisher folk ID cards, we need to change the term fisher folk as a men and women fisher folk. So if it's in the policy that men and women both are included, they're bound to give it to the women as well. But when we are using the term, so it's kind of giving and backward like imbalance for the ID card. So after a long session and dialogue, when they have sit with the women fisherfolk and they don't have any other ways to back up, so they finally agreed on this, on giving the fisherfolk ID card. So 211 women finally got the fisherfolk ID card through these advocacy and collective actions. So this is one of the strategies that has brought to the light and raised voice. So I would like to say it's a success of advocacy and campaign and collective action of the women fisherfolk.
Yes, great. And very, thank you for sharing that example, Faria. And it's also, I see that there was also a very technical response. The advocacy and the campaigning was directed towards a technical policy response that could then make a change in people's experience with those cars. Very interesting example. Thank you for sharing that with us. And finally, Maria, did you have some comments to make on this question as well as an example of a game-changing gender transformative strategy?
Sí, en realidad
Yes.
en la organización DAR trabajamos a
So,
nivel de una fórmula de
My
trabajo
organization,
que
DAR,
es la generación de
works
conocimiento,
to generate knowledge.
relacionamiento y la incidencia o
We
impacto
work
territorial.
on advocacy and land or territorial impact. When it comes to generation of knowledge, this has to do with diagnosis, problem analysis. We work with empowerment, coordinating with key actors, capacity building for key actors, those that we work with. And then when it comes to political advocacy, that's about presenting proposals and strengthening local mechanisms. I would like to give an example of something we've been working on, and we've made a significant achievement when it comes to human rights defenders. We work with human rights defenders, we work in that area, specifically indigenous rights defenders. They deal with caring for and monitoring their territories to protect them against threats such as drug trafficking, land grabbing. And right now we're working with defenders in a department in the jungle of Peru. They suffered a great deal during the time of terrorism, and right now they're suffering from illegal activities as well. When it comes to working with defenders, first, we worked on the knowledge generation through a diagnosis analysis that we've done, and we've seen that women fulfill the role of defenders, but they're not recognized as rights defenders. The organizations in these communities don't recognize women as rights defenders, and then they do not give them the protections as environmental rights defenders because they're not recognized as environmental rights defenders. So in that context, we've been able to work with them to develop a diagnosis for this indigenous people. In this diagnosis, we identified the impacts and risks that defenders face based on gender. We've established mechanisms that should be put in place for them. And we have also linked the territory of rights defenders and the differences between the men and women territories and the territories that they defend. So because of that, we've been able to ensure that organizations can recognize women as rights and environmental rights defenders, and they are given access to justice as well, because sometimes these accesses differ depending on gender. And we've also managed to get the state to develop a proposal for prevention, protection, and access to justice for women rights defenders, because previously there was a gap in being able to even present a claim or a report because of the threats that women defenders were under. and also the lack of access. For example, some Indigenous defenders could only speak their own languages and weren't able to access justice in another language. And we've also managed to establish recognition of the differences in the rights of women and men defenders. So we haven't just worked on capacity building, but we've also worked on empowerment of Indigenous women rights defenders. They've been able to recognize their role not only as support for other human rights defenders, but as human rights defenders in themselves. And we've managed to establish these mechanisms that really give them that recognition.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. And I appreciate very much that the work that you describe started with a deep diagnosis that really uncovered some, things that may have been invisible had you not started with a gender-oriented diagnosis of the situation to make visible that which maybe was hidden. Very much appreciate that was the starting point that led to the strategies and the change that you shared with us. Thank you for that. My next question, I will start with you, Faria, for the next question, and then go to the other panelists after that. And the question for you is this: what does implementing a gender transformative approach look like in practice? Were there barriers that you've encountered and had to overcome? And what advice do you have for someone else who wants to start on this work, on this journey towards gender transformative approaches? And if they want to build that into their legal empowerment work, what advice would you give them? So thanks, Faria. I'll start with you.
So when we talk about gender transformative and we try to implement in the grassroots level, so we have to keep in mind that how the mindset in the grassroots level works. So the mindset is very deep rooted, and it's already been understood in a different lens, in a different gender lens. So when we try to implement into a transformative approach, it took a very long time to build a trust between the community and between us or the defenders who are working for it. So it's one of the biggest challenge to overcome that situation, and it takes a lot of time than we imagine, because we are dealing with a mindset that has been built up for a very, very long time. And in the society, the society we're living in, it's very difficult to overcome it with the control of politics, control of fundamentalism, and control of other barriers. So, and how to overcome it, it's very important to identify a leader in the community, a woman leader or a man leader who actually has this lens of gender and can identify and can be a vocal in the community. Because when we are going from outside to that community, it's very hard for them to trust us and also listen to us. But when we will identify a leader from their community, they will listen to them. So that's why it's also important for identifying both men and women, because there are men in the society who actually really wants to have this gender balance, but for the pressure and for other problems, they maybe cannot come forward. But if they get an opportunity, they will also help to ensure this imbalance. So also provide them as much as information possible regarding like land literacy, what are their rights, what they want, and how they can overcome. Because if we provide them enough information, they will be able to raise their voice in front of the policymakers, in front of the who are implementing these and who are in charge of changing these policies. They will understand it more better. So if we provide this, path or this bridge between information and between the leaders, so the community will eventually get the like assistance they want. And regarding the legal empowerment work, it's also important if we provide them like a paralegal team or an advocate team who actually has the legal knowledge. if they want to like approach in a legal like problem in the land acquisition or land ownership. So this paralegal team will help them understand what's actually behind the laws. So that's eventually will overcome the situation, I guess. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Faria. What I was hearing from you there is your advice would cover the importance of building trust with communities, of working with leaders from within those communities that include both women and men, and thinking of that holistically as well, bridging that gap between the leaders and the information needs of others, and also providing ensuring that paralegals that are there to support those communities or work with those communities are legally knowledgeable as well to help advance those causes and see that systemic change that you were talking about. I really appreciate those. Thank you very much for highlighting them. And Maria, would you like to go next and answer this question on advice that you would give for someone who wants to start implementing a gender transformative approach in their legal empowerment work?
Bajo la experiencia de dar, yo
In
primero
line with DAR's experience,
poder diagnosticarnos como
I
organización.
could
Y lo digo porque
mention the
nosotros
diagnosis
trabajamos desde
as an
muchos años el
organization.
tema de género y
We have
pensábamos
worked in the area of
que en
gender for
realidad
many
teníamos
years,
ese enfoque transformador de
and
género,
we thought that
¿no?
we
Por
actually
esas
had a gender
actividades que
transformative
hacíamos,
approach
por el
because of
trabajo
the
con
activities
mujeres,
that we
por las
do through our work
políticas
with
internas que
women, and
teníamos
because
a
of
nivel
the internal
organizacional.
policies that we had at an organizational
Justamente
level.
al querer analizar cómo
But
estamos y
when
qué
we
debemos de mejorar,
went
quizás
to
una mirada
analyze where
interna
we were and how we
puede
could
ser un
improve,
poco
we
sesgada
took
y
an
no se
internal
alineaba hacia el trabajo de género de
approach,
dar
a perspective, and we
desde
looked at
un evaluador
our
externo, un
gender
especialista en temas de
approach. We
género,
engaged
que en
an
realidad no
external
solo
assessor, a specialist in the area of
elaboró
gender,
diferentes indicadores de qué es lo que
and they
queríamos
put together a
medir, qué es lo
set
que
of different
queríamos lograr.
indicators
Y
um,
claro, ahí también
to
teníamos
see what we
una
wanted to
brecha,
measure,
¿no?
what we
A
wanted
nivel
to achieve, and there we
organizacional teníamos
identified a
diferentes
gap.
metas de lo que queríamos lograr,
We all
qué
had
era un
different
enfoque
goals that we
transformador
wanted
de
to achieve
género, pero no lo
about,
teníamos
or we had different ideas
consolidado a
about what
nivel
a
como que
gender transformative
claro,
approach was, but it wasn't
esto a nivel de
consolidated
enfoque de género,
at
esto
a level of the
a
organization,
nivel
as
de la
in
transformación
DAR
de
wants this
género,
when it comes
no
to
teníamos
gender
algo mellado a la cultura
transformative
organizacional.
approaches, or
Eso
we didn't
sí
have
creo que sí
organizational unity,
superó bastante
basically.
realidad.
And that
Y
really
luego después
impacted
ya
us.
en el diagnóstico, en el resultado de la
And then
línea
when it came
de
to the
género,
diagnosis,
también nos ayudó a ver muchos
we
puntos que nosotros
used a gender
pensábamos
baseline
que estábamos
assessment,
muy
which
bien,
really
en realidad
helped
que nos
us
falta
to
fortalecer.
identify certain points that we
En
thought we were
realidad
doing
creo
very well,
que
but actually we needed to
bajo la
improve.
experiencia a Dar le ayudó
And
mucho este
this
tipo de análisis
type of
externos
analysis,
donde diferentes
this type of
grupos
external
o
analysis
líneas de
really
trabajo en
helped
temas de
us as
género.
an
Un
organization to
ejemplo de
work on
ello es que
different
nosotros
lines
tenemos
to improve
políticas y
our
diferentes
gender
documentos
approach.
internos sobre el trabajo
We have
interno y a
different
nivel de
policies in
comunidad
internal
sobre enfoque de
documents
género.
and in our
Pues en realidad
community-based
son ejemplos
approaches
muy
to
buenas, pero
gender.
no lo
And
estamos
we
evaluando, monitoreando o hacer
that we were
lecciones
told that they were
aprendidas
very
en esas
good approaches, very good policies,
y
but we weren't
esa
evaluating them,
limitaba
monitoring them
trabajo.
on a
Los
constant level,
proyectos
and that was
también
limiting our
tienen un
work.
componente de género, pero no tiene un
Our
componente
projects also have a
de todas las
gender-based
dimensiones,
component,
sino
but
componentes
the gender-based
específicos que no
component
logra
doesn't
en sí
encompass
en el
all the
impacto del
different
proyecto un impacto
dimensions.
transformador
So
general al
perhaps
tema de
just
género.
some dimensions that don't achieve a
Y
holistic
el otro
approach
punto
to
también
gender in all
importante
the
decía es
projects. And another
como
important
organización
point
sobre la transformación de
was
género
that
que buscamos.
we needed
Eso fue
to
lo que
understand
yo
what we
sí
wanted to achieve as a gender transformative
recomendaría
approach
dentro de
as
la
an
organización
organization.
que
So I would really
un
recommend
análisis
to
propio
all
del
organizations that
trabajo,
they
tanto a
engage
nivel
in
interno, tanto de
an
las
internal
capacidades que
analysis
tienen,
of
tanto de
the
los
internal work they
recursos
do,
que
the
tienen,
capacities they
pero
have, the
también a nivel
instruments they
externo,
use,
¿no? De los
but
proyectos que
also
se
on an
ejecutan,
external
de
level
la
when it comes
percepción
to
de
the
los aliados,
projects that
de
they
las
implement,
percepciones también de
with
las
when it comes to their
beneficiadas por el
collaboration with
trabajo, ¿no?
partners, when it comes
Yo
to
en
their
realidad
collaboration with the
recomendaría eso para
recipients
las personas
of
que
the work
quieren
that we do. And I would really,
comenzar
really
un
recommend
enfoque
that to any
transformador.
organization or any person that wishes to embark on a gender transformative approach.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, Maria, it also takes some humility, doesn't it, to be able to engage in that kind of reflection and put your own work and your own efforts to the same test that you apply elsewhere. And it sounds like that ended up being a very fruitful exercise for your organization, and, displays or demonstrates what Akila was saying earlier about the journey that we're all on, and that this is a journey. And I really appreciate that your organization was able to engage in that and be reflective in that way, and had the humility to be able to share that with us all today. Thank you. And Nobule, I'm sure you have lots to add to this answer as well. So we're going to end this question with you on the advice that you have for someone who wants to start implementing gender transformative approaches in their legal empowerment work. Really interested to hear what you can share from Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Elisa. So the first one is change doesn't happen over time. We've had a lot of people who come into the space, and because after a year you haven't seen the change that you want, you give up. So it takes time. And it's also important to go to the level of the women, the grassroots women that we're talking to. We understand, we know a lot, we've experienced a lot, but most of the information comes from those women. So when we then decide to approach projects in a gender transformative manner, try to go to the level of the grassroots woman. And when it comes to legal instruments, those instruments are very technical. I still struggle with understanding most of them, but if you want your women to be able to understand their rights and know what they're talking about, you should simplify those for them and help them know what the issues are. And also inclusion. Whilst we're about women, it's important to include men, but it's also important to include the younger generation, the young girls and the young boys. They are the future. They are the ones who are going to stay behind, sustaining the interventions. And in Zimbabwe, we've actually had youth organizations coming up from these women in hot springs who are now leading climate change work. And I think that was amazing. And also buy-in from communities. They need to buy in and feel like they're in control of the process. If they don't, it then becomes an intervention that Nobuhle came up with. When you leave, everything collapses. And it's also important to come up with mechanisms where women feel safe beyond being able to open up to you. But we should also know when those women are advocating for their rights, they are seen as a threat or as a pest that needs to be disciplined or eliminated. So coming up with measures that can make sure that the women are protective, whether it's providing them with legal support if they are arrested. It's also important. It keeps the spirit alive and allows them to continue with the fight. But also at organizational level, simple things that we take for granted, like budgeting, being able to allow a breastfeeding woman to come with her daughter to attend a workshop is important. Being able to allow a disabled woman to come with her aide who's going to be there to assist her with moving around is important. So those are my few texts and things I've learned. Thank you.
Oh, you had a long list for us, Nabule, but lots to cover there. I really also, the comment you make on time and the need for time and that change takes time. It kind of resonates a little bit with what Faria was saying, and also in some ways demonstrates that what Maria was saying as well, that these are not just quick fixes that we're talking about here. We're really talking about being reflective on what it actually takes to bring about change, having the right people involved, having the resources and spaces available to facilitate or encourage, and spur these kinds of change, and these take time, and that can actually, I mean, realistically, we all know often our funding realities for those of us who work in NGO spaces, they're very time bound. And sometimes those time frames aren't, the way that the world works. And so navigating that is also a challenge as well. I appreciate that you brought that one up as well. I'm going to do a quick check with Akila. Do we have time for one more question of the panelists that I can pose, Akila, or shall we move to the QA now? I'll take guidance from you on that one.
Yes, I think we have about 10 minutes left, so maybe we can address a couple of
Great.
the Q&A questions, and then if we have time, come back to our last question.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to now open up the Oh, actually, excuse me, Akila. I know you were sending me some of the questions. You were synthesizing them for us from the chat. I'm wondering if you can resend that link so that I can take a look at it and pose the questions to the panelists.
Yes, I sent you the link.
Thank you. Okay. I'll open this first question up to all of the panelists, and you can volunteer yourselves to respond, and more than one of you can respond as well. And the first question comes from someone in the seminar. Women with disabilities are marginalized among women, and women with intellectual disabilities or deaf women are most marginalized. Do you have any suggestion for us so that we can include these marginalized groups in gender transformative legal empowerment initiatives? What we need, some things that we need to follow so that we don't forget them and forget those who've been historically excluded. Do any of the panelists want to try answer that question? Nobule, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. So yeah, besides being a woman, there's that extra layer of having a disability, which changes the ball game and makes everything harder. But in my experience, or rather what I've noticed working with such communities in Zimbabwe, is depending on which part of the world that you are, people have myths about disability. So it starts with raising awareness. For example, mental disability and disability in general. It starts with raising awareness with the community, but also with the families who have people with disability. We have heard programs in Zimbabwe where you're supporting children with disabilities, but it's actually the family of the child that stops the child from attending because in their mind they think they're protecting the child. So it's about raising awareness about disability, and where usually workshops are held in a hotel or somewhere fancy that's not accessible for many people with disability, it's important that we actually go to the people where you have projects that you've set up for those people. Try to make provisions to make sure that it's accessible for them. But also, again, at organizational level, budget. If you're working with able-bodied people, in terms of budget, if you're 50, it's 50. But if you know you want to target people with disabilities, you need to make that extra 25 for those who come with AIDS. You need to make that extra 25 or extra money for translation, for Braille. So it's all about mindset and trying to go to the people to make the programs accessible to them. I think I'll allow my other panelists to.
Thank you for that. Do the other panelists have something to add to that?
Yeah. Thank you, Nobule. That was really informative. So we should also keep in mind that when we talk about inclusivity, we should include it when we are doing our budget and we are proposing it, like how we want to implement it. And also in the implementation, like if we're providing any services, for example, we are providing a legal support to a disabled person, but we are not providing enough resources or access, like for interpreting or for the travels and accommodations, and like how that person will reach to the court, or how they will communicate with the advocate, or how they are gonna bring their problem in front of the in front of the community or in front of the people they want to share. and how the media will work. We should also focus on that. And when we are doing it, we tend to forget about them, and it happens in most of the cases. And it's as I agree with Nabule, that as a woman and with a disability, the burden increases a lot. So providing them the resources, the access to services is really important when we're doing our work. And inclusivity, it should be in the grassroots and in the implementation, not only into the when we're talking. So that's really important.
Yes, thank you both for those very pragmatic suggestions on how to be inclusive in these ways. I thank you for that. And Maria, I see that you've unmuted, so you have something to add. Thank you.
Sí, a nosotros lo que nos sirvió mucho
Yes.
es el tema de
What
primero
helped
de
us a lot
una visita previa
is
antes de
being able to do
poder
a visit prior to
presentar un taller o acordar un taller.
developing a workshop or delivering a
Una visita
workshop.
previa porque nos ayuda con los
Why?
líderes
Because
a
that
hacer un
helps
análisis de las
us
personas
to
que participarán.
carry out an analysis with the
Mujeres,
leaders
hombres,
of the
ancianas, personas que
people that are going to be
desarrollaron
participating,
quizás,
women,
y
men,
porque
elder
es
people,
necesario que sea
older
previa
people,
un
people
mes,
that
2
have
meses
less
antes de
abilities.
poder
And it's
completar
necessary to
estos
do that
talleres
1 or 2
que
months
nos
before
permiten
finalizing
elaborar
the
metodologías
workshops,
diferenciadas
because it helps us to
para
develop different
diferentes
methodologies
capacidades que podamos
for the
ver.
different
Nos
abilities
permite
that may be
asignar
participating.
presupuesto, nos
It
permite
allows us to assign
quizás
budget.
coordinar, quizás
It
también con
allows
algunas
us to
autoridades locales
coordinate
que puedan
with
también
certain authorities or people
ser apoyo
that
para estas
could
personas que tienen
support the
limitaciones
people
para
with
participar. No hay
greater
personas,
limitations when it
porque hay
comes
personas
to
que no se podían
participation.
trasladar y no tenían a nadie quien
Perhaps
los
there are
pueda
people that
apoyar,
can't be
y lo que
transported
hicimos
or
es
don't have
contratar
anyone
una
who they
persona
can rely on to help
que
them
pueda hacer
get to
apoyo
the
por el
activity.
día de esta
And so
persona, ¿no?
we can look for people who can
Nos
support these
permite ver
people on the day.
metodologías, el tema si es una
It
persona
allows us to
sorda,
develop
muda, el tema
methodologies.
de ver
If
cómo
there's
podemos hacer
a
la
person who is
translación
deaf
para una
or who
persona
is mute,
especializada, pero es necesario que esta
it helps
visita,
us to
que
ensure that we have the
este análisis
interpretation or
rápido del
language
lugar donde vamos
services.
a asistir, a dar los
It also
talleres
enables
o
us
donde
to
vamos a
do a brief
intervenir
analysis of
sea
the place we're going to, the place we're going to be
para
developing
poder
or giving the workshop, and
elaborar
that
todas
needs
estas
to be done
metodologías
with
y poder
enough
tener todos
time
los
in
recursos
advance to
necesarios.
develop the methodologies and to make sure that we have the resources available to make sure it goes well.
Thank you. Another question we have from the group is, what was the biggest challenge in working together on braiding justice, and what was the biggest reward? Do one of you want to take a first stab at answering that question? I see you're all smiling. You have thoughts on this?
That's a complicated question, but
Yes, I'm sure.
yes, but very nice question. And one of the biggest challenges is bringing people together. Like bringing men and women together in a one platform is one of the biggest challenge, and we failed again and again, because if we are bringing men, the women will not come. If we are bringing women, the men will not come. And bringing them in one platform, it was really important to, somehow after a failing approach and bringing them together, so that we can also ensure that both of their voices are being heard in one platform, and then bringing those voices to the implementation level was one of the biggest challenge, because if they are saying something and the policymakers or will not listen to that in one time, it will take a long time, and the patience and the taking failure as a learning opportunities, and then doing it again with the challenges, and keeping in the mind that it will fail again, but you have to go on, because gender transformative is a long long pathway to the opportunities we are asking for. So
Great response. Thank you for your candor there as well. Maria and Nobule, do either of you have something to add to this answer of challenges, biggest challenge and biggest reward in this process?
I think when we were working on the toolkit, one big challenge, which can also be viewed as an opportunity or an indication of the zeal that the people had, was how I came with an issue and I felt mine was very important. And it took us a while for us to then come back to the drawing board and say, yes, all our issues are important. We're all working towards the same thing. So let's work together. I think that was the biggest challenge, but it was also a reward because it was an indication that you're not doing this alone. Everyone around the world is working towards advancing the rights of women and making sure that they are well represented. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. And Maria, do you want to have some final words on this question as well?
Sí, uno de los mayores
Yes.
desafíos que hemos tenido tanto a nivel de
One of the
Estado como
biggest
nivel
challenges that
localidad
we had,
es el
both in
cuestionamiento
terms
al
of
tema
the
de género.
country and
El
locally,
cuestionamiento al
is
tema de género a nivel
the
local lo tenemos
questioning of gender.
tener mucho cuidado
Questioning
porque
gender
daba
approaches on a
miedo
local level needs to be done very
líderes, a
carefully
personas de las comunidades,
because it
¿por qué quieres
scares
que
leaders
enfoques
and
solamente en
community
mujeres?
figures.
¿Qué
You know,
ideas le
they
quieres
say,
meter a las
why this
mujeres de la
focus on
comunidad?
women? What ideas do you want to
Y
put
ese
in the heads of the
cuestionamiento,
women
como
in the
decía,
community?
tenemos que
And this
trabajarlo con cuidado para
questioning
no tener impactos
needed to be done
negativos. Es un
very
proceso
carefully so
largo
as not to have
de
negative impacts.
capacitación, de
It was a
sensibilización,
long-term
y
process of
es algo
capacity
que también
building, of
vemos en el
awareness
Estado,
raising,
¿no? El
and
cuestionamiento en
this is
temas a
something that we see at the
ideologías
state
de género,
level,
que es aquí
you know,
como lo ven.
questioning gender ideologies, so to speak, and that's the way they see it.
Porque no dejaron de
Another
mencionar
thing I wanted to mention
barreras de desafíos era cómo darle
in the area
roles
of
de liderazgo a las
challenges
mujeres
was
sin
how to give
también
leadership roles
abrumar
to
las
women
ambos roles,
without
¿no?
overwhelming them.
Roles como no también
Because women already have
cargarlas,
so
como
many
también no
roles
adicionar
to
cargas
take
y
on. So how do we give them
adicionales,
leadership
¿no?
roles without overburdening them?
Eso también hasta ahora sigue siendo un desafío que
I
estamos
think
tratando
that has been one of the major challenges that, in fact, we're
cuidado.
still
Y en
trying
Roma
to
también,
overcome
y
very
esa
carefully.
una palabra pequeña que no quería
And
dejar de
there is one
mencionar y que
small word
justamente
that I
lo he
wanted to
podido
mention,
fortalecer gracias a ustedes, a los
and
talleres que
there's
pude
something that
asistir,
I've been
al
able
tema
to
de
strengthen thanks to you in the
cómo
workshops that
garantizar
I've been able
también
to
la seguridad
participate in,
y la
and
salud
that
mental de
is
las mujeres, ¿no? Es un
safety
tema que a
and
veces no lo tocamos, pero
mental
es muy
well-being
importante
for
para la
women.
sustentabilidad
It's something that we
de
haven't
proyectos
discussed,
de
but it's
impacto
something that
también.
is very
Gracias.
important for impact projects that we're working on. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you to all of you. I believe we could keep talking about this for a long time, particularly that last question where we think about challenges and rewards. And I know that there's probably a lot more we all can say. And I encourage everyone who's here to read through the report, but also perhaps reach out to the panelists and others and Akila and the team at Namati if you have further questions and comments on this, because I'm sure that there's a lot to be learned and a lot to share with each other on this experience and also for our work going forward. I'm reluctant to end now, but it is the end of our time. So I'm going to hand it over to Akila to help us close out. And I'd like to extend my thanks to the panelists and everyone here for such an engaging and thoughtful panel. And I was very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elisa. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists today for just the incredibly thoughtful, engaging comments. And I think we all learned a lot today. So just a few quick announcements before we close. Please, you can download the Braided Justice publication. We placed the link in the chat and we will circulate it after. All the case studies, strategies referenced today, and many more are in this toolkit. So we encourage you to read through it and also use it as a resource for your work. Come back to it, share it with colleagues and friends who may be interested. And next, we also have several working groups to connect with other members of the Grassroots Justice Network, to learn together and to take action together. One of the working groups is on gender transformative land and environmental justice. We meet quarterly, and this is available right now in English and French. We also have other working groups on corporate accountability, climate finance, and community engagement, and we'll share links in the chat where you can join and register for a working group. And next, we have a monthly land and environmental justice newsletter sharing updates from our movement, stories, opportunities to connect and learn and take action together. So please sign up at the link in the chat. And finally, if you aren't yet a member of the Grassroots Justice Network, we encourage you to join as a member. You'll have access to many online and offline learning opportunities and spaces, resources, community forum, and be part of the global community of justice defenders. So please take a moment to join us today. And thank you all to all of you for engaging with us, for staying with us and engaging in the discussion. Thank you to our amazing interpreters for helping us have this conversation in so many languages. So thank you all, and we are very grateful to all of you for joining us today and hope to continue the conversation with you all. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.